In this tutorial, I'll show you how to create a simple and fun video game, which you might have already seen in the shorts posted on this channel. If you missed it, I highly recommend checking it out before we get started. Alright, let's get started. To create a simple video game, we'll be using Game Maker Studio 2, one of the best programs out there in my opinion. The first thing we'll do is create the game level. Once you open Game Maker Studio, you'll see a list of assets on the right. Click on Room and change the size to 1920 by 1080. Next, let's create the background. Go to Sprite and create a background with the same dimensions as the room. So 1920 by 1080. And color it as you like. Then, create another sprite by importing an image of your choice. I went with cheese. Now, select the chosen image, copy it, and then return to the background sprite. You should see the image appear as a brush type. Create a second layer, adjust the opacity to your liking, and use the brush to fill the background as you prefer. Now go back to the room settings and drag the sprite you just created into the background. To add movement to the image, set the background speed and make sure to enable the tile horizontal and tile vertical flags. And there you have it. The background is set. Now let's create the protagonist, Tim. Start by creating his sprite with two images, one facing right and one facing left. Next, create the Tim object. Drag the sprite onto it and begin programming in the Create event. In the Create event, type this code. We set the image speed to 0 to prevent the sprite's frames from continuously moving from right to left. Then, we scale Tim down so he appears smaller when placed in the room. Finally, we declare the variable len, which we'll use for movement, and speedy, which defines Tim's actual speed in the game and can be adjusted to your liking. Now let's focus on the step event, which is the code Tim will constantly execute throughout the game. Type these lines of code. Even if it seems complicated, don't worry, that's what I'm here for. In this part of the code, we define the keys to move Tim using the classic WASD controls. Zaxis and Yaxis help determine if Tim is moving right, left, or staying still. Dir calculates Tim's direction in space. This part of the code states that if Tim is stationary, the variable len, which indicates the distance in pixels from the starting point, will be 0. Otherwise, if Tim is moving, len will be equal to Tim's speed. This part of the code allows Tim to move. The last part, however, simply switches the sprite depending on whether Tim is moving to the right or left. Now let's place the Tim object in the room. Great! Now that Tim is in the room, we need to create a list of objects for our game, following the same process I showed you earlier. First, create the sprites, then the objects. After that, I'll explain step by step which code to add for each object, so don't worry. Let's start with the Bully Cats object. In the Create event, enter this code, which is almost identical to Tim's Create event. In the Step event, type this code. In the first part, we're telling the cat to chase Tim at a speed defined by SPD, which you can adjust to your liking based on his position calculated by Dir. Then we create an invisible circle around each cat object to prevent them from overlapping, keeping a distance of 8 pixels between each cat. Now let's move on to the Bullet object. In its Create event, we'll set the speed to 20. Then, by setting Dir this way, every time a bullet is fired, it will move from Tim's position to the rifle, which we'll cover later. Finally, we'll add a sound that will play every time you shoot. How do you create a sound? Simple. Go back to the Assets panel, click on Sounds, and create one by importing any sound you want from your PC. A great royalty-free site for downloading sounds is Pixabay. Let's go back to the Step event of the Bullet object. The first part handles movement. The bullet will continuously update its X and Y coordinates based on the Dir direction and the SPD speed. Then we create a local variable called hitCat, which represents each cat trying to attack Tim and checks if the bullet hits it. If hit, a blood splatter will appear along with the corresponding sound. The bullet will be destroyed and the enemy kill counter, which we'll look at later, will increase. Now let's move on to the rifle, because Tim needs a way to aim at the cats bullying him. Let's start by analyzing the create event of the rifle object. We'll set the X and Y of the crosshair to follow the movement of our mouse, making it easy to aim, and assign the cursor sprite to the crosshair sprite we previously created. When you press the left mouse button, the bullet projectile will be created and will execute the code we programmed earlier. Attention, if the mouse cursor is visible while playing the game, you'll need to disable it in the Game Maker settings. In the video, I'll show you the steps to follow. Hang in there, we're almost done. We just need to cover the enemy spawner, which is the slightly more complex part, but don't worry, that's what I'm here for. This object will randomly create cats that will come from various corners of the room. Let's break down the different events, starting with the create event. But we simply declare the kill counter, which, as we saw earlier, increments in the step event of the bullet object, and the alarm value, which determines the cat spawn rate. In the step event, we add a single line of code, which will trigger the code in the alarm 0 event, which we'll look at in a moment. This line sets the spawn timing for the cats. To make things harder, I decrease the value by 1, causing the enemies to spawn faster. Finally, let's look at the alarm event. First, we write the randomize function to ensure the cats spawn differently in each game. Then, we create this part of the code that makes a cat appear randomly from one of the 4 sides of the room with a random X and Y position. Lastly, we want to see how many cats we've destroyed. So, create a new event in the enemy creator object called drawGUI, which is used to display text on the screen. Enter this code to show the kill counter. We're almost done. Now, drag the enemy creator object and the rifle object into the room where Tim is, so they'll be activated as soon as the game starts. And now finally, we can start our game by pressing the play button. Great, now you can step into Tim's shoes as he battles against the bullying cats. The only problem is, there are a lot of them, like really a lot. Poor Tim. If you enjoyed building this game with me and want to see more fun projects like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss one of my new tutorials and updates. Every subscriber motivates me to keep creating amazing content. Thanks for joining me and see you soon for more adventures.